Drinking alcohol, smoking, and drug use are harmful to health.
I woke to the sound of dripping water, a slow, deliberate plink that echoed in the darkness. My head throbbed, and my mouth tasted like copper. I tried to move, but my wrists were bound behind me, the coarse rope biting into my skin. Panic clawed at my chest as I realized I had no idea where I was or how I'd gotten here. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of mildew and something metallic, like rust or blood. I squinted, my eyes adjusting to the faint glow of a single bulb hanging from a cracked ceiling. I was in a small, stone-walled room, maybe 10 feet square. The walls were slick with moisture, and the floor was cold concrete, stained with dark patches that made my stomach churn. A rusted metal door stood across from me, its surface scratched and dented, as if something, or someone, had tried to claw their way out. I tugged at the ropes, wincing as they dug deeper. My name is Claire Hammond, I reminded myself, clinging to that scrap of identity. I'm 29, a freelance journalist. I'd been working on a story about missing persons in Blackthorn, a small town in upstate New York with a history of vanishings that stretched back decades. I'd been chasing a lead, something about an old estate on the edge of town, but the details were fuzzy, like a dream slipping away. "Focus, Claire," I muttered, my voice hoarse. I needed to get out. I scanned the room for anything useful. A wooden chair sat in the corner, its legs wobbly and splintered. Against the wall was a small table, holding a tarnished silver tray with a single object, a brass key, its teeth jagged and worn. Above the table, carved into the stone, were the words, "Solve the first or join the lost." A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't just a cell, it was a game, a trap. I struggled to my feet, my legs shaky, and shuffled toward the table. The key was heavy in my hand, its surface cold and slick. I turned to the door, noticing a keyhole beneath the handle. My heart leapt. Maybe it was that simple. I slid the key in, but it wouldn't turn. I jiggled it, twisted harder, but nothing. The lock was a decoy. "Damn it," I whispered, my breath hitching. The dripping sound grew louder, more insistent, like a metronome counting down. I scanned the room again, my pulse racing. There had to be a clue, something I was missing. The carving on the wall, "Solve the first or join the lost," felt like a taunt. The first what? A puzzle? A riddle? I knelt to inspect the floor, running my fingers over the concrete. One of the dark patches wasn't a stain, it was a seam, a square panel slightly raised from the rest. I pressed down, and with a grinding click, the panel slid open, revealing a shallow compartment. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small rusted pocket knife. My hands trembled as I grabbed the knife and sawed at the ropes. They frayed slowly, each second stretching into eternity. As I glanced at the door, half expecting it to burst open, the ropes fell away, and I rubbed my wrists, the skin raw and red. I unfolded the paper, my heart pounding. It was a handwritten note, the ink smudged but legible. "To escape the vault, you must pay the toll. Find the sequence, or lose your soul. The numbers wait where shadows fall, but trust not the whispers that call." Below the note was a series of numbers and letters scrawled in a jagged hand. 4B7, 2A9, 8C1, 6-5. My mind raced. A sequence? A code? I looked around, searching for anything that might connect to the numbers. The walls were bare except for the carving, and the chair and table offered nothing new. But the note mentioned shadows. I glanced at the bulb overhead, its weak light casting faint shadows across the room. I moved closer to the wall, noticing how the light hit the stone at an angle. The shadows weren't random. They formed shapes, numbers, faintly etched into the wall, only visible when the light hit them just right. I tilted my head, my breath catching as I made out 4286, the first digits of the code. Okay, I muttered, trying to calm the panic bubbling in my chest. The letters B, A, C, D had to mean something. I paced the room, my eyes darting between the note and the walls. Then I saw it. Small, faded letters carved near the floor, almost hidden by the damp. They were scattered, not in order, but there. A, B, C, D, each paired with a second number. I scribbled them down with a piece of chalk I found in the compartment. A9, B7, C1, D5. The sequence matched the note exactly. But what did it unlock? I returned to the door, examining the keyhole again. No, it wasn't the door. I scanned the room, my gaze landing on the chair. It looked ordinary, but when I pushed it aside, I saw a small square hatch in the floor, barely noticeable. A lock was embedded in it, with 4 dials, each marked with numbers and letters. My hands shook as I turned the dials to 4B7, 2A9, 8C1, 6D5. A loud clunk echoed through the room, and the hatch popped open. Inside was a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for me to crawl through. The air inside smelled of earth and decay, and a faint whisper, like voices overlapping, drifted up from the darkness. Trust not the whispers that call. I hesitated, my heart hammering. The dripping sound was louder now, almost frantic. I didn't have a choice. I grabbed the knife and key, tucked the note in my pocket, and crawled into the tunnel. The walls were tight, scraping my shoulders, and the whispers grew clearer. A cacophony of voices pleading, screaming, laughing. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the sounds burrowed into my skull. The tunnel opened into another room, larger than the first, but just as grim. The walls were lined with shelves, each holding glass jars filled with murky liquid and things. I didn't look too closely. A wooden door stood at the far end, bolted shut with a heavy padlock. In the center of the room was a table, and on it, a puzzle box, intricate, wooden, with sliding panels and engraved symbols. I approached the box, my hands trembling. The whispers were louder here, forming words I couldn't quite make out. Claire, help us. Don't look. I shook my head, trying to focus. The box had 4 sliders, each with a different symbol: a skull, a key, a flame, and a heart. Above the box was another note: the order is in the jars. I turned to the shelves, my stomach twisting. The jars were labeled with faint, handwritten tags. I forced myself to look, my breath catching as I saw what floated inside: fingers, eyes, clumps of hair. Each jar had a symbol etched into the glass, matching those on the puzzle box. I gagged, bile rising in my throat, but I forced myself to read the labels. They weren't names, they were dates. 4 jars, 4 dates: 1893, 1927, 1965, 2001. I glanced back at the box. The sliders had to be moved in a specific order. But what? The dates seemed chronological, so I tried that. I slid the skull, 1893. Then the key, 1927. The flame, 1965. And the heart, 2001. The box clicked, and a drawer popped open, revealing another key, this one silver, gleaming despite the grime around it. I grabbed the key and ran to the door, my hands shaking as I unlocked the padlock. The door creaked open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. The whispers were deafening now, a chorus of anguish that made my skin crawl. I gripped the knife, my only weapon, and started down the stairs. The staircase seemed endless, the air growing colder with each step. My flashlight, where had it come from? I didn't remember having it. Cast weak beams into the shadows, revealing walls covered in scratches, some forming words. They see you. They know. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. At the bottom was another door, this one wooden and warped, with a brass plaque that read, "The Vault of Truth." I tried the silver key, and it turned with a satisfying click. The door swung open, and I stepped into a massive chamber, its ceiling lost in darkness. The floor was a mosaic of black and white tiles, forming a labyrinthine pattern. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a single object, a leather-bound book. The whispers stopped abruptly, leaving a silence so heavy it pressed against my ears. I approached the pedestal, my footsteps echoing. The book was old, its cover cracked and stained. I opened it, and the pages were filled with names, dates, and photographs. Grainy images of people, their eyes wide with terror. My breath caught as I recognized one of them. Emily Carver, a woman I'd interviewed about her missing sister. The date beside her name was today's. I flipped through the pages, my hands shaking. There were hundreds of names, stretching back centuries. At the end of the book was a blank page, and on it, written in fresh ink, was my name. Claire Hammond, July 10th, 2025. A scream lodged in my throat. I slammed the book shut and backed away, my eyes darting around the chamber. The tiles on the floor, they weren't random. They formed a pattern, a maze. I followed it with my eyes, realizing it led to a hidden door in the far wall, camouflaged against the stone. I ran to it, my heart racing. The door had no handle, just a series of tiles that could be pressed. Another puzzle. I looked back at the book, then at the floor. The maze had 4 key points, each marked with a symbol: skull, key, flame, heart. The same as the puzzle box. I pressed the tiles in the same order: skull, key, flame, heart, and the door groaned open. Beyond it was a narrow hallway, lined with mirrors. My reflection stared back at me, but something was wrong. My eyes were too wide, my skin too pale, and then I saw them. Figures in the mirrors, standing behind me, their faces twisted and gray. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. The whispers started again, louder, closer. "Claire, you can't leave. You belong to us." I ran, the mirrors blurring past me. At the end of the hallway was another door, this one unlocked. I burst through it and found myself outside, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. I was in a forest, the trees looming like sentinels. I recognized the area. It was the Blackthorn estate, the one I'd been investigating. I stumbled forward, my legs weak, until I reached the road. A car's headlights blinded me, and I waved my arms, screaming for help. The car stopped, and a man got out, his face kind, but concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked. I tried to speak, but my voice was gone. I pointed back at the estate, my hands shaking. "There's something down there. People. They're trapped." He frowned, glancing at the estate. "That place has been abandoned for years. No one's there." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "No, you don't understand. I was there. I saw..." He put a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm. "Let's get you to the hospital. You're in shock." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. As we drove away, I looked back at the estate, its silhouette dark against the moonlit sky. The whispers were gone, but I could still feel them, lingering in the back of my mind. The hospital was a blur of white walls and antiseptic smells. The doctors said I was dehydrated, malnourished, and suffering from severe stress. They found no evidence of the ropes on my wrists, no cuts or bruises. They said I'd been missing for 3 days, but I had no memory of that time. The police searched the estate and found nothing. No vault, no jars, no book. Just an empty, crumbling mansion. I tried to go back to my life, but the whispers followed me. At night, they'd creep into my dreams, calling my name. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating. I pored over my notes, trying to piece together what had happened. The missing persons cases, the estate, the vault. It all pointed to something bigger, something ancient and hungry. One night, I found an old article about the Blackthorn family, who'd owned the estate in the 1800s. They were rumored to have practiced occult rituals, binding their souls to the land to escape death. The article mentioned a vault of truth, a place where the family sealed their victims' names to fuel their immortality. I burned the article, but it didn't help. The whispers grew louder, and sometimes, in the mirror, I'd see them. The gray figures, their eyes hollow. Last week, I found a new note on my kitchen table, written in the same jagged hand. "You solved the first, but the game's not done. Return to the vault, or we'll come for you." I haven't slept since. I keep the knife under my pillow, the key in my pocket. The estate is an hour's drive from here. I know I shouldn't go back, but the whispers are relentless, and the mirrors are never empty. If I don't return, they'll find me, and if I do, I might not come back. But I have to know. I have to solve the final puzzle.